and welcome back to another episode of the UCL Giving Voice podcast. I'm Izzy.
And I'm Hannah.
And we're first year speech and language therapy students at UCL. Today we will be speaking to Alix Lewer and Charly Harris, who are both SLTs at Include.org. Include is an SLT-led charity providing fun and creative ways to teach people about inclusive communication. In this episode, we are going to be asking Alix and Charly about their journeys as SLTs, what their role at Include.org consists of, and for advice for anyone starting out in the field.
Hi Alix, hi Charly.
Hi there.
Hi.
Thanks for coming on to talk to us today. To give our listeners a bit of an overview before we start, you're both speech and language therapists, but you're working in fairly untraditional roles. That's to say, you're not based in clinics, hospitals, or schools doing direct assessments or therapy in a traditional sense. So tell us a bit about yourselves. How did you get where you are now, and what is it that initially sparked your interest in SLT and inclusive communication?
Okay, well, I'll jump in to start. So I'm Alix Lewer and I'm the founder of Include.org. And Include.org is a charity based in Surrey. Our vision is a world where no one is excluded because of understanding and speaking difficulties. And I set up the charity. Well, I sort of started in 2016. It was registered in 2018, and that was following a 13-year in the NHS, working initially in community learning disability teams, a little bit with people with dementia, and then actually I was a safeguarding adults lead for 3 years as well. So I'd had a sort of really interesting, very enjoyable career within the NHS in that setting, and most of the work in community learning disability teams is indirect, so much more you're training, or at least a certain element of it is training staff teams around the individual, not expecting to effect change in somebody themselves, because if they've got a cognitive communication difficulty, then their insight is often quite limited. And the only effective way to make change is for the whole environment, the whole communication environment to be changed. And so that was what I was doing mostly, both in dysphagia to a certain extent, but particularly in communication. And I did some research. I did some master's research in 2009, looking at what affected outcomes in indirect intervention, looking particularly at values and attitudes, perceptions of role of staff in social care and in speech and language therapy. And that sort of led me down a really interesting avenue of looking at how perhaps the medical model wasn't very well suited to effecting change for individuals with communication needs, because we'd go in and we do our sort of 6 sessions or whatever, but we'd often get re-referrals, and we'd often find there'd been staff changes, or that staff struggled to implement the things that we were suggesting. And it's quite, in my experience, there can be quite an adversarial relationship between health and social care, which is a shame, because everybody really wants to be working together, and everyone of course does want to work together, but between sort of budgetary constraints and different pressures on the teams, it can be hard to work together. And I was just really interested to see whether there was a way of making it easier for us to work together as a team, as it feeling less, here comes the speech therapist to say, this is what you need to do, and then getting upset when it didn't happen, and finding a different way to try and create that change. When I was seconded onto a safeguarding role after that research, found again that there was just maybe not as much knowledge or understanding of inclusive communication as there needed to be within professional teams, within families, communities, within hospitals as a whole. And yeah, it just led me to thinking, well, is there a different model that we can take here? Is there something different from the traditional model that we can use? And that's how I got to where I am, I think, in a not very small nutshell. Charly, how about you?
Yeah, so my kind of career journey has been slightly different. So I started off sort of 22 years ago working in a learning disability team, actually, as my first job as a band 5, and I had a split post, so I also worked in an acute hospital with adults, and I then moved towards working with people with dementia. For quite a long time I specialised in dementia, which in many ways had lots of overlaps with the work that I was doing with people with learning disabilities, because as Alix was saying, it's not so much about trying to affect change necessarily in the person, but in the people around them, and raising awareness and developing skills in the people around the person with the communication difficulty. So my career then for quite a long time was very dementia focused, and I then had a child, and that sort of throws things off a little bit as well, because your sort of priorities change a little bit in where you're working and that sort of thing. So I moved then from a specialist dementia post that I was in at that time into a job that was very local to me, that was more of a team leader kind of generic role, but made sense when having a 1-year-old, it made sense to be nearer to home. And then my career I sort of found myself weirdly on the wrong part of the fork of the career, and I started to go up the sort of more management career ladder, which was fine really, because I learned a lot, and I was working with some great people, and I had lots of opportunities to develop. And then after a few years of that, I realized that I really missed only thinking about speech and language therapy, because I was managing teams that were not speech and language. I did manage speech and language therapy, but also some other professions, which was fascinating and interesting and taught me a lot. But I missed being able to just think about speech and language therapy. So I then moved into a professional lead speech and language therapy role. I then decided to start a PhD, which through opened up another can of worms. And after about a year of doing that, I realized that the management role I was in at that time, I wasn't able to do it justice whilst also doing a PhD. And just by serendipity, around the same time, Alix was looking for a speech and language therapist to join her at Include on a part-time basis. And it was just perfect timing for me, really, to change. And interesting, I guess, in terms of my career path, there was quite a lot of thinking that I needed to do at that point, because I'd been in the NHS for sort of 20 years or so, and the idea of not working for the NHS was a bit scary. So I think when I first met Alix and we spoke about whether I would apply, I think I probably said that, like, I'm a bit scared about leaving the NHS and I don't know if I want to. So I joined Include last January, and it's been brilliant, and I'm really glad I did it. So that's kind of how I've ended up where I am now, just through I guess sometimes I think in the career path, things come up that you just didn't expect to come up and didn't expect to happen. So the opportunity for me to start the PhD, I wasn't really thinking of doing a PhD. I just saw an advert looking for a student to take on a PhD that interested me, and I went for it. And then because of that, the dominoes fell to lead me where I am now. So now it's a lovely mix for me now of doing some more clinically focused work, but not necessarily direct clinical work with Include, and kind of going back to my roots of adult learning disabilities as well, whilst still doing the PhD the rest of the time.
Do you know, I hadn't really thought about the parallels there, Charlie, because I'd ended up in the safeguarding lead secondment, because I'd done the research and I was really keen to develop the research, but there wasn't an opportunity within the NHS, and this secondment opportunity came along, and within that, the research, I'd been looking at the correlation between safeguarding incidents and communication needs, and I thought, well, this would be interesting. That was 6 months, and then a full-time opportunity came along. Oh, well, I'll stay here. This is interesting. Became fascinated by the Mental Capacity Act. And like Charlie, I think speech and language therapists can be really bad at recognizing the skills that they bring to management, actually. Mm-hmm. Although both Charlie and I stepped out of kind of those more general management roles, I found that there weren't a huge number of speech and language therapists within that sort of NHS setting, but that the skills that they bring are really effective. And I think a lot of it comes down to sort of lack of confidence. So I would encourage anyone to go for those opportunities, because I think they're massively rewarding. And when I did leave the NHS, because like Charlie, again, I was thinking, I really want to go back into more just communication focused work. And I couldn't find quite that NHS role that fitted all of my interests. So and I'd also had a child. So my bizarre idea was that I was going to just focus on being a stay-at-home mum and just do kind of little bits of speech and language therapy around the edges, and ended up founding a charity. But it is, I think it's one of the wonderful things about the career, actually, is it's so broad, But it has so many skills which are valuable in so many areas. It's been a really interesting journey.
Wow, that's amazing to hear. Like, you've both had such incredible backgrounds, and yeah, it's so interesting to hear how you've got to where you are now in your career. And for Hannah and I, and for any listeners as student speech therapists or interested in speech and language therapy, it's just so interesting the insight you've already given us into just how varied the role is of a speech therapist and how many paths you can take and what you can do once you've qualified. Yeah, thank you for sharing. And so I was wondering, sort of, what does your role look like as a speech and language therapist? Like, now you're in Include, and like, how's that kind of changed since joining Include?
Well, I think Charly probably has a better perspective on this than I do, because although I'm still registered as a speech and language therapist, because I'm also leading the charities in the CEO role, I have quite a mixed role. But the speech and language therapy parts that I love still come in the interaction with our members. So we have online self-advocacy sessions where all of the skills needed to manage those groups are very much those sort of speech and language therapy skills. I'm a Makaton tutor and a Talking Maths tutor, so I also have that sort of training delivery side. And we deliver quite a lot of training around inclusive communication within the Mental Capacity Act, and inclusive communication more broadly. And although they're not every bit of my role now, I love those opportunities, and I love the fact that I was able to bring together the knowledge of the Mental Capacity Act, which came through my safeguarding role, and apply all of the principles around reasonable adjustments to communication, which are bread and butter to speech and language therapists within sort of learning disability and dementia services, but that just aren't getting out there to some of the other audiences. So those are probably my main areas. And of course, we'll speak more later about the Include choir, but that still involves a fair number of speech and language therapy bits and pieces. But I would say that Charly's role is probably the more speechy version of the of the options out there at the moment.
Yeah, okay. So yeah, my role in the charity is as senior SLT, so I don't have to do a lot of the operational stuff that Alix gets bogged down with maybe sometimes when she'd like to be more of a speechy. So as I said, I'm part-time, so I do 10 hours a week. So the way I spend my time, or have been spending my time, is, I guess it's changed. It's actually changed since I've been with Include, even, because I think initially it was really around kind of looking at how SLT is embedded in and underpinning everything that Include is doing, which of course it's there in the values and the vision of the charity, but in terms of when we're demonstrating and evidencing the value of what we're doing, I spent a lot of time kind of looking at, how are we using research, how are we talking about what we've done, and doing things like developing, I mean, these are all kind of works in progress still, to be honest, but doing things like creating a way that we can record things like how we are accessing our clinical supervision, how we are accessing evidence, how we are thinking about the work we're doing in the self-advocacy champions group, and making sure that that's evidence-based and that we're supporting those members in the best way. Piece of work that we're really trying to develop at the moment and build on, I guess it's a big focus for this year, is how we look at outcome measurement for the people that we're working with, and how we can do that in the context of the choirs and in the context of the advocacy work that we're doing. So I kind of, it's sort of, a lot of my time so far has been quite background work, I suppose, but very much trying to pull in all the SLT evidence and be the voice of SLT, I suppose, in the team meetings and things. Having said that, we have some supported volunteers, and so I'll done bits of work with one-to-one with people who might have specific communication needs, but they want to come and do supported volunteering with us, but they might have challenges around their language and their communication and their communication confidence. So helping those people to come along and making sure they get the right support from our other volunteers. So it's about making sure that our volunteers know what our supported volunteers need. So that's been lovely to go out and do some one-to-one work with people and meet them at home. And an exciting piece of work, I think, that we're kind of just looking at now. This is one of the things that I love about Include that is different from working in the NHS, I think, is that Alix and I this week have been doing some work with a care home to pilot a new approach to offering training. And it was actually an idea that was developed when we had our first SLT student with us, who came to us from City University, around looking at the communication environment in a care home. And I think in an NHS role, it just wouldn't be as easy to just reach out to a care organisation and say, hey, do you want to help us pilot this? And for them to go, yeah, okay, and we'll kind of just see how it goes. I think there's more red tape and barriers in an NHS organisation to just, we know the organisation quite well because they've been involved with the choirs and that networking and that ability to use networking to just go, can we give this a go? And then if the pilot goes well, let's see if we can get some funding to do more with it. So that's really exciting. And I think that's really different from a normal NHS role where everything sort of has to go through specific routes to get agreed that that's how you'll spend your time. So one of the things I really love about being an SLT with Include is it feels much freer to kind of say, I've had an idea. Should we do it? The other thing I do, that's just reminded me, because one idea that I had that I now do is that once a month at the choirs, I go along and run Communication Corner, which is a kind of little help desk that people can come to. And I think that was something Alix and I'd been to visit a choir, to attend one of the choirs, and it just popped into my head. And I remember talking to Alix in the car park about it. And you just said, yeah, let's try that. And then we did. So that's another way that I spend my time, and helps me get to know the members really well as well. So that's good.
Yeah, your role sounds so interesting and just so varied, and
it is varied, yeah.
Like just to hear about all the different ways that you actually carry out speech and language therapy, just so many different ways and so many different capacities. It's just incredible. Maybe this is a hard question, but what does a day in your life look like? Maybe every day is different, but what's if there is a typical day, what does that look like?
Charly, do you want to go first on this?
Shall I go? Yeah. So I'm thinking, what would a typical day be? I guess a typical day is never just a day. That would be the first thing that I would say. And I think partly that's because the choirs are in the evenings. So, for me, I'm kind of contracted to work a certain number of hours. So if I know I'm going to the choir, then that factors in how I'm spending my time. But a typical day will be might be doing some, we have meetings within the team. That's like in any job, I guess. We have team meetings. I might have a team meeting. I might have a supervision meeting with the band 5 SLT that we have with us as well, supporting her. I might spend some time looking at the latest kind of RCSLT guidance on outcomes and how we might incorporate some of that into what we're doing. Potentially, I might have a little visit out to one of our members at home to support them. Really, what I might do with members is looking at how they can describe their communication needs to people. So we've done a little bit of work on that with people, sort of giving them kind of pocket-sized descriptions, short descriptions of what they need to be able to communicate at their best. So yeah, that's kind of a bit of a mix of days, but that might be some of the things I would do in a day.
And sorry, not strictly relevant to the podcast, but just I didn't know if you noticed, Charly, that through all 3 of the people that you've been working with had all got their pocket-sized guidance with them on Wednesday, and there's a sense of ownership that sometimes I think when you're working within sort of set frameworks, you can't be maybe quite as creative as how in the way that you implement things. So things like communication passports, communication, those sorts of profiles and things like that. the way that Charly's been able to sort of go in and work with people on a very personal basis that doesn't feel quite as clinical perhaps, but much more about who are you, what's your life, what might be useful. It's been really nice to see that work really develop and grow, and to see the confidence of our members grow at the same time. So really made me smile on Wednesday. So apologies for slight aside there.
No, how nice to actually see the direct, like see people using what you've given them. That must be really rewarding.
It really is, and it's really brought home. And I'm sorry, I'm not intending to sidestep your question, and I'm not sure how well I'm going to answer it. But what's been wonderful about having Charly in the organisation is that, and our Band 5 SLT as well, is that while it was always set up, the charity was set up with the principles of SLT in mind, but there was a slight sense of imposter syndrome perhaps in myself, because because I didn't know how to run a charity. I'd been a clinician all the time, but also because indirect therapy is less seen as that, true or typical version of speech and language therapy. For a while, I felt quite sort of reticent about saying that this was a speech and language therapy charity. But as Charly's worked with us over the last year, and Claudia, our other SLT, it's been so wonderful to see all of those ideas coming to fruition, and really seeing, oh no, it was right, that is right, seeing evidence better, seeing us kind of tie all the bits together. So yeah, that's a slight aside from what a typical day looks like. I'm probably dodging the question because I don't think there is one for me necessarily.
No,
and it's probably not a very good description of what an SLT does. But I guess if I had an ideal SLT day within Include, then it would involve things like the pilot work that Charly and I have been doing. We've been putting together a research bid to look at how we can, again, further develop the case for an alternative model of speech and language therapy provision within this setting. It might be delivering training to NHS staff, but equally I've spent days delivering singing and signing workshops to people in special schools or throughout the day, corporate organisations or schools, and performing at the National Mental Capacity Act Forum in London. So wow. Yeah, there's many different ways that you can put your day together and include.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I think you keep saying, maybe that's not what an SLT, that's not really an SLT day, but I think it's really great for us and, whoever's listening to see that there is no real SLT day, and you can make of it what you want in a way.
Yeah, definitely.
And yeah, I think you're being a great advocate for the profession anyway, and whatever.
Well, it's very nice to hear. Thank you, because I know when I was a student, and I remember our lecturer who'd written the book on sort of statistics, research methods and statistics, and in the introduction in the chapter, if anyone's read Tim Brings' research methods and stats book, it talks about speech and language therapists once upon a time being confident creatures that strode the earth in twinset and pearls. And I think that was the traditional perception of speech and language therapy. And I don't know about Charly, but certainly I've had that conversation where someone said, oh, what do you do? And I've gone, I'm a speech and language therapist. And they've gone, oh, I better watch how I talk, or, oh, you help people talk properly, or something like that. And I think perhaps the job title doesn't quite fit the role anymore, because speech and language, yes, are, of course, a huge part of what we do. And this is even leaving the dysphagia side aside, but communication is so much bigger than simply speech, which is, I think, what people focus on. That it's really nice to see that there is a development in the understanding of that. And the fact that Della Money, who used to chair the SLT, the fact that she's been doing work on that 10% framework, on looking at how we can evidence that non-client focused work, and really count it as what we do, I think is a fantastic step for the profession.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's really important. And I mean, even on placement, I've had a little insight into family wellbeing centres, and that sort of part of the job is becoming, I think, more accepted and known about now. And again, that's sort of linking to a more universal outlook, and just a different perspective than, like you say, a speech and language therapist who comes in and treats your speech and makes it like perfect, as if there is a perfect.
Exactly.
Yeah, so from what you've already mentioned, and from what I know about Include already, working for Include seems like it could be so much fun and so inspiring. I imagine, therefore, that there are so many things to love about it. But I'm keen to know, what is it that you both love most about what you do now?
Oh, crumbs. I might come to Charly first on that
Will
one.
I
Is
go
that me?
first? Because I think I can. The thing I love most, without a doubt, is being with the people that use Include. It just never fails to make me smile. And so for yesterday, I went to the choir to do my communication corner, and I actually was really tired yesterday. I've had quite a busy week, and I had a bit of a headache, and I said to my husband, "Oh, I just wish it was next week. I'm really tired." And I went along, and honestly, within about 5 minutes, I had forgotten all about being tired, because what you're surrounded by, first of all, I had one of the guys that I've worked with to produce his card just appeared behind me, grinning at me, saying, have you got my card? And I said, oh yes, I've got it for you here, because he hadn't been there last time. And the smile on his face, and then the seeing everyone singing. I mean, it's such a lovely, one of the things I love best about the choir is when they sing the song about they sing a song, I can't remember which one it's called, Alex. Is it, I don't know if it's the ground rule song, when they sing to the tune of We Don't Need No Education, and
Yes.
they sing We Don't Need No Discrimination, and I just, all these people in this room singing that song, all these people with learning disabilities, it's just thrilling, and I love that, and it always cheers me up. So I think, yeah, the people are what I love.
Oh, that's so lovely. I've listened to a few of the choir's songs on YouTube. So that's for anyone listening who didn't know that already, you can go and listen to the lovely songs.
Yes, songs are.
Yourselves. But yeah, what about you, Alex? What do you love most about what you do?
I think it's quite similar, to be honest. And there's lots of bits I love, and I do love it when there's an opportunity actually to come together with Charly and with Claudia and with one of the associates that we work with, and to think like a speech therapist again. Because I think being a CEO, sometimes you're very much in that. Although I was trying to get out of management, I'm still in management, obviously. I love the conversations where we can go, could we apply this model, or what about Karen Bunning's this, or all of that stuff which I learned, which I'm still applying now, which I love. Yeah, I've got some really well thumbed books on my bookshelves that I remember writing essays about as a postgrad, and so many wise, wonderful people out there that are able to guide you when you step outside the NHS, which is brilliant. But I do think, yeah, there's also a lot to be said. I mean, probably, yeah, the bit that gives me the biggest smile is being with our members. And you describing that song, Charly, made me smile. So that particular song, it is called the Include Choir Code of Conduct, and it was written really early on in the journey of Include. And I don't know if people are familiar with talking mats, but basically a talking mat is a big mat with symbols on it, and it's fantastic sort of thinking support tool and communication tool. And we had a giant one. We had like a really big one that you'd have in your hall with really big A4 symbols on it. And at that time, the choir was only about 16 people. And we've now got 135 members across 2 sites. So it doesn't work quite so well in a group setting now. But at that point, we just kind of got out and went, okay, how do we want people to behave? This is what's okay and what's not okay in the choir. And people were absolutely clear. We were there with support staff who'd maybe never seen an inclusive an inclusive communication approach like that. And they were getting quite involved as well. And people were sort of physically putting down the symbols. And so we've got this song that says we don't need no discrimination, we don't need no bullying. So we took all the things that they'd said and put them into a well-known Pink Floyd tune. I'll say which. And then at the end of that, we'd said all of these things, and yeah, no, it's not okay to swear, it's not okay to be rude to people, it's okay to take a break, it's okay to help each other. And at the end, we got to the end of it. So I said, oh, have we forgotten anything? Is there anything I need to write on there? And somebody went, well, sometimes we have cake. And I was like, I'm not sure if that's part of a code of conduct. No, it is. Absolutely. So we went, oh, okay then. So it's now on the back of our shirts, and it's something that we sing about. And it's one of those things where it's become a bit of a mythology all in its own right, because what's cake got to do with speech and language therapy, particularly from a non-dysphagia perspective. But I think what it symbolizes for me is that cake makes people feel special. Cake comes out on special occasions. The icing on the cake is when everybody is totally there within the moment, within those sort of special moments. And it feels that include and cake have a kind of a synergy, which is inclusive communication, which is, you can be there supporting people with communication needs, and you can do all sorts of things. But unless you're genuinely engaging with them in their language, in their way, whatever that is, whether that's intensive interaction, whether that's modified speech, whether that's symbols, unless you're doing that, you're not providing the cake. It's very basic rich tea biscuits, and we want everyone to have cake.
Oh, that's brilliant. I love that.
Yeah, that's amazing. Include really is such an amazing charity. Just like the things that you're doing, with every question that we're asking you, it's like you're sharing just even more of just the incredible things you're doing. It's so great that there is a charity that exists that does all of this. And it's just been so great to hear about your amazing careers and backgrounds and just the incredible work that you're both doing at Include. And I was just wondering, for any newly qualified therapists who are listening, or for like Hannah and I who are studying, what would be like a piece of advice that you would give to us?
Oh, I think self-belief is something which I know when I was training, we were so many of us were really worried about getting it wrong. And because we focus so much on, standardized assessments and particular approaches, none of which is wrong. Don't get me wrong. I mean, I've spent the last year and a half sort of recruiting Charly and hoping that she improves our evidence base. So I'm not trying to undermine the evidence base. But I think that part of the evidence-based triangle that sometimes we're less good at is that personal experience side, is that what have I tried that's really worked? And having confidence in those things and confidence to build on those is the thing that I would say, has been a really key part of my journey. It took me, 6 or 7 years to actually leave the NHS to set up Include. I have a colleague who, if she's ever listens to this, will be laughing herself silly, because we used to get the train home and I'd say, do you know what, I'd really like to set up a choir of people with communication needs where we could sort of teach Makaton and things like that. And she'd go, well, go and do it. And I was like, I don't know how you do these sorts of things. And I could have done this a lot earlier. I'm not sure it would have been the right thing, but that kind of confidence just to try something new, provided you are documenting it, that you are discussing it with your peers and your supervisors, and applying the evidence base that I think we're such a young profession, relatively speaking, and we're so desperate sometimes to prove ourselves against other more well-established professions, that I think sometimes that can lead us to try and fit within certain boxes. And communication is something which is involved in every aspect of life, and I think the profession is much broader and has much more to offer than perhaps it has yet done. And so that would be my advice, is be brave.
Yeah, that's great advice. Thank you so much.
Charly, how about you?
I think sort of along the same lines, really. I mean, I was thinking about this, and I think it's about being open-minded as well. And we've talked a little bit about how the work we're doing is maybe not a traditional SLT role, but actually when you train as an SLT and you qualify, you have all these skills that are transferable, and you can use them in different roles. And whether that's as Alix talked about earlier, going into a more management role where you can use really excellent communication and people skills to be a good leader, or whether it's doing something like working for a third sector organization, or whether it's working in a school, your skills are transferable. So don't come out of uni and think, oh well, I've only done these sorts of placements, so I can only get that sort of job, be open-minded, and it is about being brave as well, but thinking about all the skills you have that you will be able to use in so many different settings. And the other thing I kind of wanted to say as a tip, really, which is a bit more practical and maybe a little bit boring, but whatever your first job ends up being, be assertive about getting good supervision. It's really, really
Absolutely.
important. And I think with the world of SLT beginning to change and there being different kinds of jobs and different kinds of settings, to me, that's a concern that maybe people might go into jobs where they don't have really good regular supervision from an SLT that will, particularly in their first year. So make sure you get that. And if you're not getting it, ask for it, because you should be having it and you're entitled to it. So that's like a more practical little point I wanted to make.
That's an excellent tip. I think on that front, actually, I have one other one, which is don't spend hours writing really long reports because nobody will read them.
Nobody will read them.
The more succinct you can be and more creative, the better.
That's it for part 1. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, check out part 2, where we talk more to Alix and Charly about include.org and what it aims to achieve. Bye for now.